Welcome to Season 2 of Frontline Fridays, brought to you by Ubik. I'm your host, Ron Thurston, and in this season, we're exploring what it really takes to lead on the front lines of retail and hospitality. Together, we'll unpack the biggest shifts in frontline work and how smart leaders are navigating them to drive results where it matters most. Each episode features top executives, industry experts, and global operators sharing practical tactics you can put to work immediately. Today, we're exploring a simple but powerful idea: store teams as your brand's final marketing mile. It's the moment where all the planning, storytelling, and strategy meet the customer face to face. My guest is Ian Scott, an independent retail consultant, guest speaker, and host of global retail safaris across Europe, the US, and Asia. Ian helps retailers and brands connect the dots between store design, technology, and shopper behavior, proving that the most powerful marketing still happens in person. Ian, welcome to Frontline Fridays. I am so excited about this conversation.
I'm so pleased that you invited me. I feel it's a great honor and really looking forward to the conversation, a topic that's close to both our hearts.
Amazing. And I would love to start the show with how I know the guest, because I almost always know first connection, second connection, or a long-term relationship. And if I remember correctly, you and I met in 2020. So it's been, I think, 5 years. I remember having a Zoom call with you, I believe, in 2020.
Yes, that was right back at the start of my consulting career. Yes. And then we finally met face to face in New York this January, I think it was.
Just this year. Yes. So we had regularly calls and then finally met in person. And then I had the pleasure of doing a retail safari with you in London this year, and then another one just recently in New York. So I am definitely a big fan. I understand the importance of your work and really wanted to have you on the show. So let's start there. Give us the bit of a background about how you became really, I think, the most important voice in retail safaris, in multiple countries, which we're going to dig into. So tell us a little bit more about you.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I mean, I was 25 years in business development around the retail design and display and promotion sector. And then I got a fabulous job, 2018 it was, head of retail innovation for a big marketing services company, which allowed me to travel the world, run innovation workshops, trend presentations, and host some store tours for brands like Lego and Coca-Cola and L'Oreal, which was an incredible job. And that opportunity to run those sessions, but also to then go and observe retail around the world, I found invaluable. To walk the streets of Seoul and Tokyo and Shanghai, as well as New York and Europe, enabled me to see firsthand. But then in 2020 with COVID, I was made redundant. And I did a lot of activity on LinkedIn where I was like a huge fanboy of physical stores. So I was never promoting a business on LinkedIn. I was just talking about cool stores. I've seen this amazing shop. And people responded to that because they found it interesting. And so I tried to leverage that when I started in, I think, July 2020, when I started my consultancy. It was an interesting challenge trying to focus on the physical store environment during a global lockdown. So it took a little while, but it sort of picked up. And yeah, as you say, things like store tours have become a major part of my business now, as well as my wife describes it, you don't work, you stand around and talk about shops. And she's absolutely right. And the fact that I can earn a living from it is an absolute blessing.
And I know, because I've seen you in action, you're not only obsessed with store design and customer experience, but you're obsessed with the teams in stores. And we're going to dig into that around just the differences that you've seen globally. But where does that love of the teams on the front line come from? Because that was not your background. You're a store design.
It was
expert.
Business development and design. Yeah, but I think you either get social interaction or you don't. Some people are happy sort of staying indoors doing their own thing. Other people want to get out and engage. And I'm one of the latter. But also it was one of those things in 2001 when I first started working in the retail industry, having been in business to business marketing, where your activity sort of disappears into the supply chain and you don't always see the impact of what you do. And within the first few weeks of working for a retail design agency, you go into a store and I was like, I call it the sharp end. This is where everything that happens from digging minerals out of the ground to manufacturing processes, marketing, distribution. It all ends up on a shelf in a store. And I was just mesmerized. I was just like, this is where we decide whether we're going to buy a product or not. And I also recognize that the store and the staff play a huge part in influencing that. Bad staff can get in the way and prevent sales. Amazing staff encourage you to buy things you may not have thought of or buy more than you originally planning to do. So I saw them as that final ingredient in this mix that influenced the final purchase of the end consumer. And I was just hooked from day one.
It sounds like you should have been actually a head of stores early in your career.
I met a good friend of mine who's now head of stores in the store group this week, and she was describing this role she's been doing for the last few months. And I see what you mean. You know, she spends 3 to 4 days a week walking around, going to stores, chatting to the staff. And I'm going, what a cool job! You know, I'd love to do it.
It certainly has its own challenges, but the overall joy that you feel of what you love to do most, which is understand the store experience and particularly rooted in great teams is exactly what being a great head of stores. So I will call you, as my friend, an honorary head of stores.
I will wear that badge with pride.
I want to chat about just the differences, because you've done tours across in the US, you've done them all throughout Europe, and you've also done them in Asia. And one of the things I'm always curious about are what is the same about all of us that lead retail, and what's different. So why don't we start with what's the same? What do you think about when you're in stores in these different countries? Not think about, what do you observe?
Well, a lot of people try and pick out the differentiation, but what I know, the common underlying thread is human DNA. And that is a consistent. So much of human behavior is consistent because it's ingrained in our DNA, the triggers and responses. And you may find there are cultural variances between activity, communication, what's popular, but how to trigger and influence and appeal to a human, most of that is common. So you will see good display and merchandising works wherever you are around the world because it will trigger and engage customers and entice them to buy. But then that human layer on top as well, you know, giving good customer service is a universal aspiration. There are varying degrees of success as to how that's implemented, but that's more down to individuals and company culture rather than an Asian approach to an American or a European, for example. So to me, that's the commonality. The variances I found fascinating. I first went to Asia in 2019 and I was fascinated. They're more digitally engaged, higher proportion of mobile phone use, but also e-commerce and digital sales in relation to physical in Asia. And when I first went out, I was sitting there thinking, oh, this is where all the new inventions and the new technology appear. But you realize that is globalized and distributed and everyone has access to that. And what I discovered when I went out there was the interaction of shopping. If a new thing is implemented in the store in Asia, people want to have a go. I mean, I walked past a department store. One of the beauty brands had a vending machine outside and there were 200 people queuing out into the street. And our vending culture is more established in Asia anyway. But 200 people queuing up to buy a lipstick. And I'm going, you can buy it over the counter in the store. But, you know, that new experience was engaging. And I realized that in Asia, people will try new things more. I saw a concept grocery store. They were doing the 30-minute delivery, which 6 years ago was quite new. But I watched a gentleman who must have been in his 70s paying for his groceries through facial recognition. And even today, I think in the Western world, there would be reticence about that. There's a more willingness to share data in Asia because they go, well, if I share my data, you will give me better and more personalized experiences. We are still very suspicious of data sharing. And we've had all sorts of examples of misuse of data gathering, which sort of fires our reticence. And I realized then that when you come up with a new idea in Asia, they embrace it, which drives innovation and progress more. You know, I saw someone using a Bluetooth shopping trolley in Shanghai where you put a strap on your wrist and the trolley follows you. And I was like, wow, this is cool.
Wow.
I posted it on LinkedIn and I had all these Europeans and Americans going, oh, that won't work. The trolley will crash. I'll bump into it. What if it goes wrong? And that was my light bulb moment, because in the Western world, we find reasons to say why it won't work, while Asia are just busy embracing it, and they're coming up with a second version of it while we're still saying, no, it's not going to work. And that to me was the fundamental difference.
Have you seen differences in how the store teams approach their career when you're in conversation with people? And I remember you and I having conversations with store teams, in New York or in London, and do you get the sense of their pride in their work different by country, or do you find it everywhere?
I think a lot of it is general, because I think that comes down to also the uniqueness of individual humans and the culture of the business, which could be down to their store manager or their area manager, or it could be the culture of the business. I'm sure I will end up talking about Lush a bit later on, who I often use as a benchmark for good store experience and store staff. But you see, they build a very great culture, and some companies do that. And I often find the brands that are passionate, ethical, and driven, you think of the Lushes, the Patagonias of this world, they will attract staff who believe in their ethics. So it's more of a passion project because they want to work for a company they believe in. You get to say a lot of grocery stores, and you will find that employment is a lot more transactional, where it's a job. There's a paycheck, and there's some hours I can put in to earn some money. Mass generalizations. But I think a lot of it is down to those individual elements. But there's certainly, when you go to countries like Japan, and also I found in Singapore, the culture of service is also tied around passion and pride and shame if you get it wrong. But again, I've had poor experience in Tokyo as well as amazing. There are too many human variables to be universal. But I do find that culture of good service is better ingrained generally in a lot of the Asian cultures and countries. But then, having said that, I think the US has a higher standard of general customer service than most of the countries in Europe as well.
And when you are kind of sharing these findings, because I know you also do keynote speaking and panels, when you're sharing these findings with retailers in the audience, what do most retail executives misunderstand about what you're trying to do? How do they describe you, and why do they hire you?
I think what I found is that they tend to hire me. They say I'm very passionate. This is really weird. I've got to big myself up when it's not a British trait at all. They say they like the passion, but also, people like you and I have the real benefit of an independent point of view. We're not selling or representing a business. We're not answerable to a boss who expects us to say a certain thing. And I deliberately decide to be very open and honest in my thoughts, hopefully fair, and qualify it. So the people that do engage me do say that they like that fact that I will give an honest opinion, and then also try and qualify it. So, and that's as far as I'm going to go, because I feel really awkward trying to go, because I'm amazing at this. I have no idea. All I do is I post a lot on LinkedIn, and I try and be as open and honest as possible. That will attract people that agree, and it will repel people who disagree. And I often say I have no idea how many amazing projects I lost because of an opinion I posted on LinkedIn, and maybe it's better I never know. I'll never get out of bed otherwise.
But I think I look at it and say we need honest yet intentionally positive momentum voices in the industry.
Yes.
Because I think what I observe often are some of those other voices that are often on LinkedIn kind of speaking poorly about brands. My response is, first of all, you're not inside the brand, so you don't understand their unique challenges. But maybe more importantly, the part that is most troublesome to me when people do that is that people who work for the brand read these comments or have the potential to read them, and it diminishes the pride in their work. And so no one wants to see their company spoken of poorly or their leader spoken of poorly. And so I think we're in this sense often of trying to re-engage, re-inspire, almost like re-pride them in many ways. And the photos of poor looking stores don't help that scenario. So I'm with you of we need the voice, we need honesty, but we need honesty with intention to create momentum in careers in the industry.
Yeah.
Not to encourage people to lead.
I agree. I mean, as I certainly find, particularly in the UK where I'm based, the general media, retail is an easy target, and it's a kicking boy for bad news. And I've often called it out on LinkedIn, where I get really frustrated with the negative views. You'll see an article. There's one particular newspaper I won't name, but constantly you see articles, this leading brand is closing a store. And they're actually refurbishing and opening a bigger one in the same city and plans to open 20 more in the country. That is, conveniently omitted because the story that grabs the attention is the one store that's closing, not the 20 that are open. So I find that frustrating, and I'm constantly complaining about particularly the mass media, not the retail media. The retail media are normally better educated, and they also have a vested interest in the industry doing well. But general media, and like you say, this has a huge impact on the morale of brands, but primarily the store staff. They're in the front line. They don't get paid as much, and they have to deal with all the physical abuse and threats that someone in head office never has to deal with as well. So like you are, I will be critical of things, but I will be very constructive, and I'll explain why I think it's not good. And I'll even try and suggest where I think it could be improved. And I think you have to be constructive and support, and I hope that my passion and love for the industry underlies anything where I may challenge what's going on. And I say it because I want it to be better, not because I want to kick it while it's down.
I love that point of view, because you're exactly right. And that's how it's perceived. This is not with the intention to just gossip or speak poorly. It's with the intention to learn and as an industry, and have a bit of a reality check about what might be happening out there. And because you have the eyes and ears of the world in retail, you have a very particular point of view, which is a really important one. So I love what
I also feel there's an element of responsibility. Makes me sound way more grandiose than I am. But when you get engagement from people, you become conscious that a lot of people are listening. And you also learn on LinkedIn, 90% of the people that avidly read what you say and like it never say anything. So the engagement with what you do is way bigger than you think, based on the direct feedback you get. And I think is weird. People like you and I, we do carry a responsibility to support the industry. If people listen to what we say, then we need to make sure we're saying things in the right way.
I agree. So thank you for what you do. I wanted to speak kind of bigger on this kind of idea of like the final marketing mile, like the importance of the store. But you said something to me that has stuck with me, of like retail's 90% common sense. When you put it in that perspective, and you know what, you're actually right. The clean, neat, organized, efficient, well merchandised, it's common sense. It's common sense in running a business. But why is that such a important statement to you?
Well, because I told you a story once about, when I first started in retail, I got dragged into a meeting with a load of high-powered people from advertising and PR agencies with £1 billion turnover client. And I was 4 weeks into retail, and they pointed to me as the retail expert, which scared me to death. And my response was not based on 20 years of experience. I was just going, this is common sense. You need to do this and this and this. And it resonated with them. I mean, it scared me witless, because I was like, goodness me, all these powerful people pointed to me as a business development manager. But that was when I realized that, that there's a lot of clever technology in retail, particularly in the last few years. But what the tasks they're trying to do are very simple. Like you say, you lay out your products, you present them in an appealing way, you hire people to represent your brand and talk about those products, and you take people's money. And I'm very mindful when I'm on stage. I often say there is a simple formula for successful retail, which is understand all the reasons why people come, what I call the shopping missions. I don't care whether you're Gen Z or what car you drive, why are you coming to the store? Because some of those missions are about availability, some are about quality, some are about price. Could be the same customer on the different missions. So understand all those missions, find a cost-effective way of answering as many of them as you can while you make a profit. And I often say this, and I go, I'm a smart ass up on stage saying this. And I know for most brands, it's about $10 million of 3 years to do that. And I just walk off going, thank you very much, goodbye. But to me, if you break it down that simple, and like most things, it's so easy to overcomplicate things. And most people that are trying to do good things in retail, their faces against the wall. They've got a boss and a deadline and KPIs and budget considerations. And sometimes just step back. And I know you and I, we have this wonderful luxury. We're outsiders looking in. What we see as common sense. Other guys, I don't have time. I have to sort this out. And my boss is telling me, and sometimes, where we can best help is just stop, take a step back, observe, and then go forward. And it is a huge luxury I have to be able to be outside. I don't have that deadline and that pressure and 500 stores to make profitable and people going sick and all those sort of problems, but a lot of it is just that it's common sense, really.
Common sense. And what I love about that concept, which I think is what great retail can be, is take the things that are the most simple and make them as least time consuming as possible. So if you think common sense in all the operational efficiencies, the merchandising, all the process, make that as simple and common sense, and spend the extra time then on hiring, learning, development, investment in the front line, so that, because that leadership can also feel like common sense often, but it's more complex than visual merchandising.
The human bit is more complex. Like you say, laying products cleanly on a shelf, there are guidebooks and experience where you can learn the principles that you can then apply to your own environment. But the intricacies of motivating a disillusioned member of staff, or resolving a conflict, or, trying to get an underperforming salesperson they're more complex. But again, there are tried and tested ways of developing HR, human interaction and performance enhancement as well. But it's much more nuanced than do I display that product on the left or the right, which is a binary.
And we talked about this idea, for the title of this episode of the associates being the last mile to success.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? And I have my own opinion, but I want to hear yours first.
Absolutely. Well, it comes back to that statement I said when I first got into retail, and I said, retail is and the store is the sharp end where people finally decide to spend money, and the people in the store will either hinder or enhance that. And you realize that, and we may touch on a little bit later about unique aspects of the store, but staff play this massive part. I call them the living, breathing embodiment of the brand. So you train these people to represent you, and then they will freefall. They will respond to each customer and each situation differently. So you are relying on them to enhance the brand image that is in your advertising and your social media and everything else you do to build an appealing brand. These are the people that actually deliver it face to face. So if they get that wrong, all the other work you've done, which is often has much greater investment than stores, which you and I know is a crime, but it's a reality. A TV ad will have more money spent on than training staff, but the staff will make or break everything. And all your TV advert will do is drive awareness into the store, where your staff will either make or break that experience. So that's why, to me, they're fundamentally the most important part of it.
What I would add is I often, though, think it's underestimated the power of the front line in that scenario. I think, when you say that they expect them, I think sometimes it almost like they think it as an accident that these people have the greatest impact, positively or negatively. And it's all, no matter, it's not about price. It is about the level of human engagement that happens. That's why I love your Lush story. Yes. Lush is not a luxury brand. The ideas around engagement and loyalty and building a business on relatively small dollars at high transactions is so fascinating, because we make these assumptions about high touch luxury service, but high touch, high impact service can be done at a very low price point.
It can. And talking with Casey, their head of retail, it's just fascinating to see. They've just decided people are an important part of our business, so we will invest in them. And she has this wonderful phrase that I often use a lot as well. You recruit well, train well, and trust, and your staff will deliver. But that's down to recruitment. And also their store managers, each one has the power to choose their own staffing levels. It's like they're running their own business. They have to justify that, but they could, if they decide they want to up their headcount by 10%, they have the power to do that. And when they recruit, again, this is common sense, but often applied by a lot of companies, is They recruit on personality and train product knowledge. If you work for their major competitor for 10 years, it doesn't make you a perfect employee for Lush. And their job interviews, you are applying products to another human. Another member of staff will sit there and you will show how to apply a cream to an arm, because they want to see how you interact. And the conversational approach that they have, they were, the worst thing in any store experience is you walk in and someone goes, "Can I help you?" And you go, "No." Just as that's the end of the interaction with that. Yeah, how to kill an engagement. They won't. They'll be like, "What brought you?" Oh, I often guess, "I love your flowery shirt." And they start a conversation, not about the products or the brand. They connect human to human. And even if you wander off then, you want something, you will instinctively and subconsciously go back to that person who said that fun, interesting thing when you walk through the door. And I love seeing that. And constantly with Lush, I go in there, and they're wonderful. They always host me when I do my store tours. And I went in once and the store manager wasn't available. And the assistant manager said, "Oh, this girl, Georgina, will step in and help and do the tour instead." She was amazing, talking about sourcing, manufacturing, ingredients, the whole process. And afterwards, she came up to me and went, "Is that okay?" And I went, "You were awesome." She goes, "Oh, I was so nervous. I've only worked here for 6 months." This person who worked there for 6 months, we had a couple of people who were fascinated about the manufacturing process of the soaps and the shower gels. She answered every single question. And to me, that was just a great example of how they invest in their people.
Yeah. And you're right. That sounds like common sense. It seems basic, yet you're doing that at scale, which they've been able to do, is one of the most powerful parts of their brand. I've heard you speak more about the people than about the product. That is a very interesting flip on how most people would describe, I bought this and I love this product, but more importantly, what was the team? How did they engage? What was the level of training and development? That's for me, the future of this business is always going to be that investment on the people side of this. It's the anti-AI conversation of we have to be better every day than we were yesterday about how to engage human to human. We are continually provided things that divide us and that keep us apart. And we then, as a retail industry, have, I believe, the responsibility then to find ways to get closer and to become more human and to become more engaged, because there aren't places to do that outside of retail at scale.
So I often start a lot of my presentations with COVID, because COVID caused everyone to stay at home. So we were shopping online, not in stores, and we couldn't go out and socialize. But what I love from the human behavioral point of view is when we were able to interact again, we all came out and really started to appreciate shopping and going to a restaurant and a cinema and going on holiday. And the Chinese have this wonderful phrase, revenge shoppers. And it was this sort of mass overcompensation of social interaction. And to me, it was another one of these sort of lightning moments where I go, yeah, this is where we really understand the power of humans. And so rather than the physical store dying, and we had so many of these sort of tech-focused companies and people going, we're all online now. I mean, that hideous phrase, new normal. Well, if new normal now is we're all online, and I was going, this is rubbish. Our behaviors and our habits in particular our behavior changed because we were forced to stay at home. Our habits were on hold and we reverted back. And I have statistics that sort of show that the impact of COVID made no difference to physical share of retail sales. We carried back on where we were, zero impact. And to me, that was a testament to the power of interaction with humans. Because we wanted that benefit of touching and feeling the product, but actually interacting with other humans in the process of retail as well.
Your work and things like this podcast, that's the goal, to continue to reiterate that message. Not everyone is as deep into it as you and I are about the importance of this. So, the random person on the street may not understand the power of what we're trying to do around reconnecting humans. It's not about selling anything. We're reconnecting people just like COVID, but we're doing the same thing today. We are. And it's equally powerful because we had an end date to COVID. We don't have an end date to what's happening in technology. I should say we don't know what the future is, but we know it will change and will continue to become even and more AI assisted. That's why I'm so passionate about them. We have to work harder to bring people together. I think people actually want to do that.
I agree. I mean, I roll my eyes whenever you read about a new thing happening and everyone goes, it is the future of retail. No single thing is the future of arguably the biggest industry in the world. Now, AI has had a bigger impact than ever. I mean, everyone's talking about the metaverse. If you remember that a few years ago, I often joke to people, if you Google it, you may be able to find out what everyone was talking about. And we had huge companies renaming themselves, mentioning none in particular because of it. AI will have a bigger impact, but I always turn around and say AI should enhance the unique aspects of retail, not replace them. Now, an AI can be a wonderful tool, but I'm sure you find the same. I walk around trade shows and I'm like, come on, surely someone wants to talk about something apart from AI, and I know it's a big thing and everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, but I get scared when people think it will solve all their problems. And the best stores I walk into, I describe as wonderfully analog. And that's not because I'm anti-technology, but you go into a Lush. You and I were in Bub Mason in New York recently.
Yeah.
I went into Loaf, a beautiful sofa and interior. There's like no screens, or if the screen is there, it's a subtle little enhancement to one aspect. You're not drowning in media, not being bombarded. It's a space where you feel your blood pressure relax. You can see everything. The people love what they're doing and they engage with you. And you come out with a smile on your face. And I often say most retailers could improve their offer by 20% by getting the analog basics right, not hiding behind AI to try and paper over problems that could be fixed in a more conventional way.
I love that. And you're absolutely right, because you can feel that difference. The reliance on technology can put the wedge between you and your team and the customer. And I love that conversation. I want to wrap up just with this idea of frontline training and trust and empowerment, and to really think about the power that you've observed when people are like well-trained and trusted.
Yeah.
I love your story about you hire as many people as you need to. Here's your budget. Of course, there has to be a budget. It's not a nonprofit here. So we have to really think about how to do that. But where have you seen that really shine, and how does it show up in the experience?
I think one of the things where it really shows is when you see the staff believe in the company. Lush were an example, but I'll try and move beyond Lush. I'll have people telling me off because that's all I talk about. But we found it in the Buck Mason store, this sort of mid to premium gentleman's outfitters, beautiful, relaxing store. And you speak to the staff and you can see they absolutely believe in the brand. And there's a sense of pride when you go, I love your store. And they take it personally. And that's often a test. If you talk positively or negatively about a store in front of the staff, the disengaged staff are going, I don't care. It's a paycheck. The ones, if I've been in a store where they've asked me and I've actually pointed out a problem. And one of the best things ever, when you see these staff defend the brand and they go, no, but it's this and we're changing this and we're doing that. And I come away loving the brand more, even though I started off by being critical. And then the flip side is when you love a store and you see that response from people and they go, yeah. And they go, you can see them going, I'm part of this and thank you for acknowledging it. And that to me is a real way of instantly understanding, and I constantly love this when I'm doing my store tours. You go in advance and you talk to a store and go, I'd like to include your store in my tour because I want to showcase the best in this city. That is an opportunity for them to be positive. And sometimes, you get a store manager and you almost have to go, you've been talking half an hour about your store. We need to move on. But I love the fact that they're just so engaged and want to tell their story and showcase. And when people come away, I've done it with store tours, and afterwards I've had people still talking about the staff in that store 6 months later going, how do I clone him so I can put him in my stores? Because I absolutely love what he does. And I can't iterate it enough. You see these people who buy into what the brand is doing. They love it and they want to tell everyone else. And it's almost a byproduct. They actually sell you a product. And they're far more successful at selling because of that approach, rather than here's the steps I've been taught like a robot, which just disconnects from the experience, I think.
Well, I think about you and I were together in Longchamp in Soho, and Sam met someone who you introduced us to that had this incredible art history love and spoke just with such confidence about the art in the store design concepts, recent renovation. I learned more about that brand from that young woman in
Yes.
10 minutes than I knew about its entire history. And I had a very different appreciation for the brand when I heard what she spoke about, why the store looked the way it was. And moments like that change perception of brand. When you talk about the last mile is the front line, without that young woman sharing the story, it's a pretty luxury brand among many beautiful luxury brands in the same neighborhood. But the store told the story, and she helped paint the edges of the art. And I was enthralled by that.
When I did the research for the tour, the day before, I went in and spoke to the store manager, and she immediately said, right, I'll just call over Mariana, because she knew that she has that passion. And she came over and she lit up. She goes, you want me to talk to the girl? I went, if that's okay. And she was brilliant. And what I loved is when we were walking around, we had a lot of people that run stores on the tour, and they were going, well, why is this space like this? I don't understand it. She goes, oh, that's because there's natural daylight in the window and people can come. So even when people are challenging the layout, she not only defended it, but she came up with credible reasons why the store was designed like it was. And she understood how customers use the space. And what I love is I posted about that experience and a picture of her on LinkedIn. The CEO Longchamp responded with pride, and I'm going, it's so cool when you're able to highlight someone so that the head office senior people get to see and understand that their people are appreciated. And to me, that's one of the real pleasures of what I do, and being able to use a channel like LinkedIn, where senior professionals will get to see and understand how amazing store staff can be. And I think that's fantastic.
I think it's fantastic too, and would also then encourage more executives like that CEO and their entire leadership team. We say it all the time: get in stores, ask questions, see what the front line's doing, capture their feedback. They are the most valuable asset of feedback in your company.
They're living and breathing the space you've designed for 30, 40 hours a week. They will tell you what works and what doesn't. And it astonishes me when you talk to brands and I'm going, this is free feedback. You've already paid these people, You walk into the store in a friendly, engaging way. The worst thing is the scary CEO visit where everyone's terrified. You need to get away from that. You need to be welcoming, listen to problems, and get back to the staff when you say you're going to. That's so critical. But they'll tell you if people can't find a product, or you're getting loads of returns, or people are annoyed because the thing in the window or that you've been promoting isn't in store, whatever, a million reasons. They will tell you what works and what doesn't. And I'm going, you already have this information in your business. It's the easiest, credible, relevant feedback you could ever get.
Credible is such a good word. Last question, Ian, just advice you would give to retail leaders listening that they could do tomorrow that would change something in a positive way when you are out in the world.
Go and visit your stores, right? Again, blindingly obvious common sense. A lot of people are too busy to do that. I'm sorry, but you should. But don't do the big planned CEO visit, because first of all, from your point of view, all you're going to observe is how well they prepare for your visit, not how the store operates. Turn up and announce, but don't make it a scary, confrontational thing. Walk through the door with a smile, chat to the staff, make them feel relaxed, because first of all, you won't get any honest feedback if they don't feel relaxed. Listen to what they say. If you say you're going to do something and get back to them, do it, because you could go in and do this wonderful visit and they think that's great. If they talk about an issue and you say, I'll get back to you, and you don't, that just disillusions them. And I would say that is the biggest single step that most retailers could do. Turn up and announce, be friendly, listen, and respond and give feedback. And you will find the staff feel special. The CEO spoke to me, I talked about this, and then he responded. That is one of the biggest motivational factors you could get. And I know we will focus on money, but you get a happy person. You don't need to pay them 20% more to keep them engaged. You reward them by making them feel part of the team. And the best thing that can happen is listen and respond to the guys that are actually delivering everything for your business.
Could not agree more. You should have done the foreword in Retail Pride, because that is exactly.
When you write your third book, I'll happily help her.
I'm going to take you up on that. Ian, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you. I love what you do. I appreciate our friendship, and you are a very important voice for the front line of retail. So thank you for what you do.
High praise coming for you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Today, Ian reminds us that frontline teams don't just execute brand strategy, they embody it. They're the storytellers, the trust builders, and the brand ambassadors who turn browsers into believers. So for everyone listening, here's your challenge this week when you're in stores. Observe how your teams engage with the customer and each other, what they notice, what they celebrate, and what's getting in their way. Because if you can see the brand through their eyes, you can get even closer to unlocking that last marketing mile. Thanks for listening, and a special thanks to Ubik, the presenter of Frontline Fridays. Ubik is the AI-powered platform that helps retail and hospitality leaders connect, train, and empower their teams. Ready to make your frontline your competitive advantage? Visit Ubik.com. That's YOOBIC.com to learn more. Until next time, keep leading boldly and keep celebrating the people who make your brand come alive.